You'll win if you just don't quit. You really will. There is a finish line of victory, but I think there's so many times people stop short of the victory because they just get tired. They don't see the fruit. And I'm just going to encourage you, most of the time, you're not going to realize that it's a success until you're years, if not decades into it. Welcome to Made for More. My name is Aaron Burke. This is Bobby Sasser. We are so pumped that you are joining us on another episode where we're helping leaders, whether it's in the business world, the church world, those that are running nonprofits, even in your home to home, to really be a better leader, walking into the more that God has for your life. We've been talking in this kind of season about all things when it comes to staffing and church growth and life and ministry. And today we're going to talk about avoiding burnout, no matter what industry you're in, of really creating a culture where you are healthy and your employees, your staff, your dream team is healthy. Burnout is a real issue that many of us have dealt with. And I've had moments in my life where I've gotten to the edge going, man, this is like a struggle. What was once easy is no longer easy. So we're going to help you today with the subject of burnout. Bobby, thanks for being with me today.
Yeah,
we've been running this thing together for a long time in ministry. And so we've both gone through good seasons where we've been like super healthy,
for sure,
emotionally healthy. Our families are good. And we've had other seasons where I'm like, dude, you need a break or I need a vacation.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I do think that burnout for a long time was almost like this word of like, oh, you know, whatever, man, you're weak. And now it's become more of slowly becoming an epidemic among leaders. It's becoming an issue. And I think a lot of that centers around what work is. You know, we're living in an interesting day. You got to think less than 100 years ago, 75 years ago, the industrial age of like people went to work, they clocked in, they built widgets in a factory or in a classroom. They taught kids, whatever they were doing, but it was very clear that they clocked in, they worked, they clocked out. Now we live in a world where our work is everywhere. It's at the tip of our fingers at any given day. We could literally work 24/7, regardless of what your position is in most places. And I think the data is showing that it is crazy metrics of people that are exhausted, that the amount of people that are stressed out, both secular in the church world and everything in between. It has become a problem. It is a major problem.
Here's the stats is that employee burnout costs U.S. corporations $190 billion in healthcare spending. $190 billion. That's from a Harvard Business Review. According to Gallup polls, 44% of people reported feeling burned out regularly at their job. And you know what it feels like. You know what it feels like when you've slept, but you're not rested. Where you're in your dream job, but you're not satisfied. You are literally, you're even taking a day off, but you're not disconnecting. Why? Because you've gotten to that place of burnout. So we're going to address it right up front of the fact that like burnout is real and we want to help you avoid it in your life. If you are burned out right now, I think this is going to be a great episode for you to really receive a fresh grace for what God has called you to do, really receive encouragement for the season that God's got you in, and the good news of it. Okay, let me not give away the end of the episode, but I'll give it to you right now. It's just to say, there can be refreshing and rejuvenation that happens to where you love your job, you love your family, you love your calling again. And I know it might seem like this is never going to get better. I'm always going to be in this rut or this cycle. You're not going to be. It can get better. And we're going to show you how today to do it. And I wrote it down this way, that burnout is a form of exhaustion caused by constantly feeling swamped. It happens when we experience too much emotional, physical, and mental fatigue for too long. In many cases, burnout is related to people's jobs, but burnout could also happen in other areas of your life and in your health.
You know, it's so true. There's so many great authors. Honestly, even whittling it down to a few was hard because so many people recently have written so much great things on this. Some of my favorites is Carey Nieuwhof. He talks a lot about this. He actually is a pastor from Canada that's kind of shifted over into a leadership consultancy kind of thing. And he has a book called At Your Best. And he is actually someone who has overcome burnout. He hit the wall, and he was a driver. I mean, he was an attorney who shifted over to be a pastor, a real driven individual. But he talks about this idea of knowing your zones. He wrote a book called At Your Best, and it's green zone, yellow zone, red zone, green being kind of your optimal time to work, red being your drudgery zone where, for me, that would be like your hours of, 5 to 7 p.m. I'm just like done. For me, I'm an early morning guy. So I've had to learn how to adjust my schedule so that everybody that is important to me gets the best of who I am. But I think a lot of that has to do with burnout. When we're overworking in our drudgery zones, knowing when to optimize the right times to do the right things will really dictate how you approach burnout and sustainability.
Yep. So how do you know if you're burned out? Well, you're not enjoying what you're doing. It is constantly fatigued. I know people that they're getting headaches and migraines all the time. Maybe it's overwhelming anxiety and you're just feeling anxious more than you ever have before. I've seen it when people that they're overeating or they're under eating. It's just like it's affecting your eating habits. And it really is affecting your ability to have joy and to experience peace in this season. So I've always heard it said this way, your body keeps score.
Yeah.
So you might not think that it's affecting you, but your body's telling you, whether it's telling you through anxiety or whether it's telling you through fatigue or whether it's telling you even through the cravings that you have in your flesh, your body is keeping score for the wear and tear that you're putting on it. So we've got to listen to our body and go, what are we doing that's unhealthy for us so that we can be all that God's called us to be? So we're going to break down some keys of how to avoid burnout and really what causes it. And I really believe it all comes down to a real big factor is that burnout happens when we forget our why.
Yeah.
We forget our why. Why are you doing what you're doing? When it becomes about a paycheck, when it becomes about the fact that I've got to do this because it's the only opportunity I have, or when you forget your why, you get burned out because the why is your fuel that keeps you going even when the excitement of the job has dwindled. You got to remember the why. And if your why is not something that's bigger than yourself, bigger than even this earth, it's bigger than your lifetime, then you're going to constantly be burned out because you're going to be thinking all the time of going, man, this is exhausting. Man, what is this even for? Remember your why.
I think remembering your why is crucial. If I can personalize, and I haven't shared this with you yet, but actually recently, Ezra, that's my oldest son, he's 13. He mentioned this about you the other day. He was like, he calls Pastor and Uncle Aaron, and he's like, Uncle Aaron, he's always ready for it. Like he's always on. He's like, and I was like, explain that. And he's like, he's just like, he's ready to go. So my question would be, for you really personally, for a long time, it's not like you're a flash in the pan. It's not like you planted the church, it grew overnight. You're the overnight success that's been a few decades in the making. How have you sustained your why?
I think there's a real discipline and focusing on remembering what got you into this the first place. It was interesting when the children of Israel got into the promised land, the very first thing they did is they took 12 stones and they built a memorial for what had happened.
Wow.
Why? Why would the first thing you do when you get in your promised land to remember what you just came out of? Because it is the remembering that is the fuel to get to where God has called you to go. So I have to remember my calling. I have to remember the God moments. I have a very bad memory, so I have to write things down. Like, what are the miracles that God has done in my life, in my family, in my church that keeps it going? And then some of it is just discipline. You see, discipline is the decision to keep going long after the feelings of excitement have left. And what we have missed in our world today is just people that are going, I'm going to be disciplined. I don't care if I don't feel it anymore. I'm going to remember the why. I'm going to remember eternity. I'm going to remember the legacy. I'm going to remember my children. I'm going to keep going long after it. And honestly, I think I practice a lot of this stuff that keeps me excited about the season that God's got me in. I'm always trying to get better. So we're going to live in such a way that I'm going to remember the why, because really, here's my encouragement for our listeners today. You'll win if you just don't quit. You really will. You'll win. There is a finish line of victory. But I think there's so many times people stop short of the victory because they just get tired. They don't see the fruit. And I'm just going to encourage you, most of the time, you're not going to realize that it's a success until you're years, if not decades into it. You know, people have asked me, they're like, you're like, hey, man, it's amazing to see that your church is a success. And I'm going, don't call it that. I'll let you know in 10 years if it's a success. Like, we don't really know yet. How do we know? People are like, man, you're such a good parent. I'm like, don't tell me that. My oldest is 11. I don't know if I'm a good parent yet. Wait till they're 25. Then we'll see if I was doing a good job.
Then we'll see.
So you got to remember your why and play the long game in this. It'll refuel you.
What are some other things when you think about burnout and how to avoid it?
Okay, so burnout is really a lot of the result of just not taking a break.
Yeah.
All right, so a lot of your life, you can't run 7 days a week. You cannot do the grind that the world wants you to put into this thing. God set up rhythms for us so that he shows us that you don't have to do this every day of the week, 24 hours a day. You've got to have seasons that you're off. You got to think about this. God created the world in 6 days, and he took a break on the seventh day as a day of rest. I always thought about that. I'm like, why? Why would God do that? He doesn't need a break. You know, the Bible actually tells us he never sleeps or slumbers. Like, why would he take a break? Well, he did it to us to show us a routine that you are at your best when you've taken time off.
Wow.
So what he was doing is he was resting to then go into the next area of creation, which is what he's doing now. He's still creating. He's still doing what he's doing. And he showed us that before you go into work, you start with rest. So we don't rest after we work. We rest and then we work. So your day, it's very interesting in the Jewish calendar and the Jewish day does not start in the morning. It doesn't. So we think of, I'm going to start, I'm going to work, and then I'm going to pass out exhausted tonight. The Jewish calendar, the Jewish day started at night. So you start with rest, you wake up refreshed, and then you're able to win the day. Can I just tell a lot of our listeners this? You will never win the day if you don't win at rest.
That's absolutely true.
You won't. If you don't know how to sleep, if you don't know how to get to bed on time, I actually heard a guy say the other day, he goes, 90+% of your problems would be solved if you would just go to bed on time.
Go to bed on time.
That's the problem. You wake up angry. By the way, there's a lot of things that you shouldn't be doing that you're doing late at night. So the temptation's too wild. So just go to bed on time. I literally am in bed around 9 o'clock every night, asleep 9:30, 10 o'clock at the latest, because I want to wake up at 5 a.m. refreshed.
Yeah.
And so you got to take a break. You got to turn off the devices. You got to have a time that you're off. I just want to hit on, you said something so good about the fact that like we live in a day and age where everybody can approach us. Everybody can talk about us. When does your work day end?
Yes.
That's a big deal.
Question, yeah.
And you and your spouse need to talk about that. Your family needs to talk about that. Like, my work day ends this moment. So for me, it's when I drive into my driveway. Like that, my work day ends. So I'll do phone calls all the way home. I'll do whatever I need to. But when I get in that driveway and I have that time at 4 o'clock in the afternoon or 5 or 6, whenever I get there, I'm now full on dad, no longer pastor. Yeah. I got to know when my day ends.
I think that's very, very important. And I don't want us to miss that you've set a time, you've set a place, you know, that's your driveway. There's some other people that might need a little bit more gap than just their driveway. But either way, finding something, I do want to highlight, Cal Newport wrote a book called Slow Productivity. He's written several great books, but his big kind of consensus is that in the digital age, we're consumed. So for example, and I won't rattle off too much, but just to make a point is you have, we're church leaders. So think about our church. For those of you that work in an office setting, whether it's an organization, a nonprofit, that because of the relational components, you could be at work all day. You can actually respond to messaging, whether that's text. We use a platform called Slack. It could be email. It could be anything. And there's chatter all day, but there's not really anything that happens. You know, you can be busy all day without really working. And so then what happens, and this is what Cal Newport really heavily emphasizes, is then because all of these apps that we communicate with, that we project manage things with, are on our laptops, which we take home, on our iPads, on our cell phones. And so because we've talked about work all day instead of working, then we have to take our work home with us, which is usually for those of you that are moms and dads and married and all of that. But even if you're not, and your friendships, like our relationships are the compromise of us not working when we're supposed to be working. We live in a world where they've kind of coined it as knowledge workers, which unless you are in the trades and you're, doing something really practical like that, or you're just a clock in, clock out type job right now, you are probably a knowledge worker. You're sending emails, you're working on projects, you're doing different things like that. And it's so vital that you, as Pastor Aaron said, you have discipline. You have the ability to work when it's time to work so that the other things that are very important, the relationships, your personal health, your mental health, emotional, your fitness, your hobbies, whatever you want to do isn't compromised because you're taking your work with you all the time. You're not taking a break. You're forced to work when you should be off.
The tension is I have so much to do. I can't get it done in my work time, in my work hours.
Yeah.
The advice given to me years ago from my pastor, he said this phrase. He says, God has given you all the time you need to accomplish everything he has called you to accomplish.
Very good.
If there's something you are trying to do that does not fit on your calendar, then that means there's something on your calendar that is unnecessary or what you're taking on is outside of God's will. That is how serious it is. Let me just roll off some stats. Americans work 137 more hours per year than Japanese workers, 260 more hours per year than British workers, and 499 more hours per year than French workers. Listen to this. This is mind-blowing me. Americans only use about half of their vacation time. Only 23% of employees take off all the time they've earned, and nearly 10% of all employees take off zero time every year. Like zero time.
Yeah.
That blows my mind. It shows us we take such pride in our productivity that we're burning ourselves out.
Yeah.
And you're not going to last very long in this. So 3 things that I think is just crucial on this that I think would be really helpful when it comes to the idea of taking a break. First of all, take a break every day and have a time where you are clocked out.
Yeah.
Secondly, take a day off every week. That's a biblical principle. It's called a Sabbath. It means to cease, to take a break. And thirdly, take a vacation every year. This is a time away to where you totally disconnect from work so that you can be refreshed and replenished and rejuvenated in your relationships so that you come back a better employee and a better pastor and a better father and a better leader. I actually do this. I've done it with Bobby. I've done it with so much of my team where I'll go up to him and I'll go, what's your vacation look like this year? Oh, we don't have anything planned. I'm requiring you to plan something.
Yeah.
Well, we're really tight financially. I will figure out a way to help you financially go. And they'll go, well, that's so kind and generous of you. Actually, it's very selfish of me because I know I'm going to get a better version of him when he comes back. It's selfish. It's my way of going, I know that I believe in the biblical principle. When you take a break, you actually get refreshed and rejuvenated and you come back better. So Katie and I, we get away every year by ourselves, even in the poorest seasons of our life. Right before we launched a church, we had no money. We went away for 3 or 4 days by ourselves, and it just refreshes. It's a reset for our marriage. Make it a point to get away and take a break.
Absolutely. I think the rhythms that you described, go back and listen to those if you missed those, the daily, the weekly, the monthly, the annual, like get those systems in place and plan ahead for them. I want to highlight a couple quick things just on the vacation portion.
Yep.
Because I think that is an alarming stat that we just went over, and I don't even know if everyone heard that correctly. But we have a very generous, PTO policy. That's paid time off. Most of you, that's become a thing. Like Netflix, for example, their organization has a 0 PTO, meaning that you could take as much time as you want. There's all of these large organizations that have extremely generous PTO policies, but no one's taken any time off. That's become an issue. And so the real tagline there is a vocation versus vacation. We focus so much on our vocation, which is exciting. Like I'm excited about what God has called me to do. I love my job. I feel passionate about it. There's that old, it's an old show. It's Fred Flintstone, which, thank God for those vitamins.
Yes.
We are who we are because of them.
Shout
Shout out to the elder millennials out there. But the reality is this like guy, he hated work. He had his little metal lunchbox and it was like, oh gosh, it's just another day. And that is usually not the case for our day and age. Most people love what they do. They feel called to what they do. They're passionate about what they do. Yep. So it's no longer an issue of like, we hate our jobs. And it's not that we dislike the other parts of our life, but because we focus so much on our vocation that we miss out on the vacation with our families, with our friends. And it's not because we don't care, but because we don't prioritize, it doesn't get planned. And so Carey Nieuwhof, I mentioned him a little earlier on. He has this strategy where he calls it the 2-hour vacation. Essentially, find some time several times during the week is his advice and do something that is that you enjoy, that brings you energy, that turns your brain off from work multiple times a week, and do it. And it has to be under 2 hours. So Craig Rochelle, we've mentioned him on a bunch of different podcasts that we've done. He's leading a massive organization, largest church in America. He's an extreme personality. His 2-hour vacations are jujitsu and flying. Like he took up flying, because his mind, it has to be fully engaged. If you're being choked out by another grown man in a jujitsu gym, then you're not going to be necessarily focused on your work. If you're flying a plane, it's like, okay, we've got to stay alive. And so I'm not going to be focused on my work because I'm focused on this. I'm not saying you have to do jujitsu or fly a plane, but find something that you enjoy that isn't just rest. And that was a massive, Pastor, and that was huge for me to realize, because for so long I thought rest meant that, I had to sit there and contemplate and reflect and sit in a chair quietly. And that is not my personality. Like I like to be active. And so I had to find rest in doing stuff. Like I was active. However, I ceased from work. And that is the key when you're Sabbathing, when you're vacationing, when you're taking time off to really focus on your health and focus on your energy.
When the first signs of burnout appear, take a vacation. That's my advice for you. Take a day off, take a vacation. When people come to me and they go, I'm at my wit's end, I go, great, go away for the weekend, pray, enjoy life, go fishing, come back. Don't talk to me while you're exhausted. Get refreshed and replenished. And then this will keep you effective in the long haul. I want to set rhythms that I can do this the next 30 plus years of my life. So I can't run this thing at full throttle at all times. I've got to take breaks. And my wife is so funny. She's like, there is a vacation, Aaron, that is a totally different person. I am a different person on vacation. I am no schedule. I am like so unorganized. I'm a crazy eater. Like I just have fun, and it's a totally different world. She's like, I love vacation, Aaron. But the only way I can do vacation, Aaron, is that I have work habit and ethic, Aaron, too. So you got to have both. Both are necessary. Here's the last thing that I think would just say that is a big thing that causes burnout that I see in so many people's lives is unhealthy work environments. And I want to challenge our leaders that are listening to this, that you are responsible for the environment of the workplace that you oversee. And when it is unhealthy, when there's gossip, when there's slander, when there's drama, when people are not effective, when tasks are not getting done, when things are disorganized, what ends up happening is people feel scattered, they feel uneasy, and they get burned out. So it's our job to do the behind the scenes organization so that we create an environment where things can effectively work and grow. And it's the same thing. It's like with gardening. I'm not a gardener, but I have known that every plant I plant dies because I don't understand the key. And your wife has got really good at this.
She does have a green thumb.
And even talking to her about this, it's so, and Bobby, and you're good at it too, I'm sure, but she's really good at it.
No,
and my wife and I were even talking about how Kat is, it's less about the tree and more about the soil.
Yeah.
The soil matters.
It really does.
And the soil of your organization is your staff culture, your staff environment, how y'all deal with conflict resolution. What are you doing to create an environment where people get life from their job? Which, by the way, one of the ways that people get life from their job is that they're productive. They actually they go, I got something done today. Yeah. So when you're in a job where nothing's getting done and the ball's not moving forward, it drains the life out of them.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think focusing on the big picture is huge. If I can just for a moment talk about the individual. And again, this isn't about, don't box yourself in, but there's a component of how you approach your own individual work area. David Allen wrote a book called Getting Things Done, and he harps on this in a whole chapter on what he refers to as your workstation. But here's the reality: is we were a church plant, and now we've become like a more established. In the early days, offices were not really a thing. Right. So this isn't about whether you have the fancy office. Some of you might have offices. Some of you might have cubicles. Some of you might be somewhat portable, where you're having to bounce around your vehicle. It might just be the way that you organize your backpack for work. However, that is a work environment that can be so beneficial. And again, I don't want to harp on different personalities too much, because the way we organize things might be differently. However, you should have a plan. You shouldn't be like going into every day like it's chaos. You have the ability to hire some help. Maybe that's not your personality type necessarily, and God's given you the ability to have some help around you that can kind of streamline some of that. The way that we work is so determined by the things around us. If you walk into an office and it's cluttered, it's like, instead of working on that big project, then you start fidgeting with all the things that are out of place in your office because that's easier to do than do the big project. And so burnout, those are little small indicators of burnout that we have to pay attention to. So your work environment, not just from a cultural standpoint, obviously that is massively important. Like that's focus on that with everything that you have, but also just really practically from the way that you organize the stuff around you, the way that you organize the systems that you work within can help be a relief from some of the burnout.
Absolutely. And you know what? I think a lot of you are listening to this right now and you're like, I'm trying to do this stuff. I'm trying to apply it to my life. Do heavy evaluation of why am I frustrated? Why am I upset? Why is this not easy? The Bible says love covers a multitude of sins. So when love is high, the little frustrations don't matter. It's like when you're married, when you have really, really great love for that person, you don't care about the socks on the floor. You don't care about the fact that he goes and plays golf with his friends. Like you don't care. But when love is low and there's tension, then everything is bothering you. So when everything is bothering you about your job, when everything is bothering you about your work environment, do evaluation. Am I getting burned out? Did I forget my why? Am I at a place where I really am evaluating my work environment? Am I in a spot that's actually healthy to where I can be all that God's called me to be? Am I taking care of my body? Am I eating healthy? All those kind of things make up a huge part of being a person that can do this for the long haul. And let me just remind you, your body does keep score. So when you're burning the candle at both ends, when you're not eating healthy, when you're not exercising, when you're not taking a break, your body's remembering that. And eventually you're going to have a place where you feel totally exhausted. What do? You take a break, take some time off, take a sabbatical, whatever you need to do. Those moments are crucial for the longevity of your life. Here's the good news is that you can still be rejuvenated into what God's called you to be. So it's not the end. I love hearing stories of people who are like, man, I was done. I felt burned out. I felt exhausted. But whether it was a break, whether it was changing their eating habits, whether it was just discovering their why, they overcame burnout, and you can too. Any last remarks, Bobby?
No, I think we covered it. I think, focus, get some plans in place. Like you are called to do so much, and this is a marathon, not a sprint. So focus on your personal health so that you could be all that God wants you to be and to the full potential that he has called you to be it.
We want you around for the long haul. Well, this is our episode of Made for More. Make sure you like, share, let us know how we can do these things better. We're always trying to improve, but send us a message on Instagram. Let us know what you learned, but we look forward to seeing you next month. New content is out the first Wednesday of every month. You really are made for more.